Cashflow Diary podcast, episode 511.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because here's what I know. You are out there trying to grow your business or maybe start your business. And maybe you've started your business and what you've realized is, oh my God, I am overwhelmed. I got too much to do and I don't know how to keep it going. Or maybe your business has been going well and you're like, man, what's next for me? I don't really know. Or maybe you're like, one day maybe my business, I can make it go public or something. All of these things and more, the entrepreneur we're going to be talking to today have actually solved and has done. Today, we're going to be talking to Beerud Sheth, and you may know him as the founder of Elance, now Upwork. And if you've been paying attention at all, you know that Upwork recently had its IPO. We're going to talk about, obviously, the journey of getting through that process, but also what is he up to now? Because I think there's going to be a lot of you interested in understanding, what that next step may look like and how that journey happens, because you guys know where you start isn't necessarily where you stay, but you do know that you want to continue to play because you're not done. Just because you created one doesn't mean you don't have more creative power inside you. And now we get to learn and listen and hear how it's actually been done by someone who's been there. So help me welcome Beerud Sheth. Beerud, how are you doing?
Hey. Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking the time to be here. I definitely appreciate it. Now, this is the first time that you're here, and because of that, I have to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody else the first time that they're here. You ready?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. So I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes, like Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, etc. Because I tend to think that superheroes and entrepreneurs, we have a ton of things in common. For example, as an entrepreneur, occasionally I can envision myself, going around town, using our products and services, saving our customers one sale at a time. And at that moment, I am probably wearing a cape. And also, though, like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning. If you think about Spider-Man, for example, there was a time where he's just a kid going to school, doing his thing, taking some photos. And then one day he gets bit by a spider, discovers that he's got a superhuman ability and he gets to choose whether to use it for good or for evil. So my question to you is as follows. Before MIT, before Elance, Upwork, before your current company, before all the things that you have done and people know you for today, what we want to know is, who is Beerud Sheth?
Well, so I grew up in Mumbai, India, and in a average middle class family, and I just loved reading. I was sort of blessed with good analytical skills, so I performed really well in math and computing and all the analytical stuff. I think, but more than that, the other thing was I was always very driven and very determined. Just on my own, wanting to do something or being persistent about whatever I was working on. And I think that in particular, those traits really, when I look back at both my journey as well as where I started, those are the things that have stood me in good stead because, no matter how smart you are and how hardworking you are, things don't always go as you plan. And at least for me, the the grit, the determination, the resilience. I think that's been a common thread, both, when I got started and how I've been here. And that's probably, I would say, is one of my, superpowers, as you called it.
Totally understood. So now you said something that's interesting. You said things don't go as planned, but yet was Elance Upwork your first company?
Yes, that was my first company.
Well, many people would say that would be exactly as planned. I mean, your first company out of the gate actually makes it all the way to IPO. Sounds like everything went perfect. Or is there more to that story?
Well, to put it in context, it did take 20 years from start to IPO.
I see.
And it was an incredibly long and difficult journey. In fact, that's often the untold story of Silicon Valley, because you hear of a lot of these overnight successes, but in our case, it was 20 years in the making, and it took multiple near-death experiences, two financial booms and busts, right? The 2001 crisis and the 2008 crisis. Nearly sort of pivoting a couple of times, meaning changing strategies completely. Cycling through a whole lot of people. Some losing some and not able to afford many others, and so on. So there were a lot of challenges along the way that I can talk about, but it's really, really hard because sometimes you have these difficult times, and if it lasts 6 months or a year, you can sometimes still deal with it. But when it goes on for like 3, 4, 5 years, right, which after the 2001 crisis was pretty intense, a very, very difficult phase for us and probably a lot of other companies as well. I think that's when it's a real test of your perseverance, right? Because you get these thoughts about, is this what I plan to do? Is this how it's supposed to go? Should I be doing something else? And so on. And then you just stick with it. And that's what it requires sometimes.
So let me ask this question. Was IPO always the goal from the beginning?
Firstly, IPO is still not the goal. It's sort of an intermediate milestone, honestly, right? I think the company, I do think Upwork is a company for the ages. It has barely scratched the surface of the freelance economy, or the gig economy, as we call it. It still has a long way to go and is going to transform the way of work, right? So really, I don't think of it as an endpoint or a goal. But it is a significant milestone, of course, because to be able to do an IPO, you have to build a long-term sustainable business, a profitable business, a company that can survive scrutiny and challenges and so on and so forth. So I think in that sense, yeah, it was certainly one of the milestones we wanted to achieve. And the point is not the IPO in and of itself, but just building a company that's adding value to millions of people, that is generating millions of revenue and is profitable as well. And that was always the goal. Yes.
Got it. That totally makes sense. Now, did you think it was going to take as long as it has taken?
No, I think certainly not. Right. I think, as they say, entrepreneurs tend to overestimate the short term and underestimate the long term. So we certainly overestimated the short term. We thought this would be quick. You hear about companies. I mean, even think about sort of Silicon Valley stock option vesting cycles. They tend to be 4 years. So mentally you think, okay, in 4 years or maybe 6 or 8, if it takes long, is how long it would take, and then it gets harder and it's longer and it's more challenging and so on. And in our case, it really took, about 20 years. So certainly did not expect it to take as long as it did.
So let me ask this question, because you said growing up in Mumbai, average middle class family, you've got reading analytical skills. How do you go from there to your first idea being what we now know as Upwork? Like, there's got to be a path. There's got to be something that happened in between. I mean, or did you just wake up one day and go, I know?
No, actually, there's a very clear path, and it was literally all my formative experiences culminated in this idea of Elance and Upwork, right? So firstly, so from Mumbai, like I said, I was blessed with an exceptional academic record. So I went to IIT, which is sort of the MIT of India, and then I went to MIT for grad school, which of course is MIT itself. So, I studied computer science at both places, and then after that, after graduating. Interestingly, I worked on Wall Street because I always wanted to, apply the technology I'd learned to, in the real world. And Wall Street just sort of, it felt interesting, felt exciting. I learned a lot. And then, in about the late 90s, I was looking at, I was eager. So while the experience on Wall Street was great, I was eager to get back to the business of technology, to entrepreneurship. And as I was thinking about these ideas, essentially sort of three different concepts, came together in my head. One, being from India, I knew that there were smart people all over the world, including in India, right? And that if you could reach, would enable some very interesting possibilities. Two, having studied computer science all along and seeing the internet trend that was happening, it was very clear that the internet enabled matching people and made distance irrelevant, right? And three, my Wall Street experience helped me realize that you can create a marketplace for even seemingly illiquid, products like software development and graphic design and translation and so on. So if you think about it, what we ended up creating was an online marketplace for services. That connected freelancers worldwide to businesses that needed to get work done. And I think that's how it began. And to this day, it's exciting. That's exactly how it stayed. And of course, there's a lot more detail and it's evolved a lot. But that was the core idea and the core themes, sort of, kind of flowing through my early career and my life coming from Mumbai to Boston and New York. And that's how it came about. Yeah.
Got it. Totally understood. Now, you mentioned that there was a near-death experience. Were you talking about the death of the company, or you mean yourself?
Company. No,
okay.
Fortunately, that's what happened.
Yeah. Well, tell us about that, because I'm curious. Like, oftentimes in times of stress, for some reason, we as humans can occasionally believe that, there was never a difficult time, or there was never a time where the entrepreneur or founder, doubted, will this make it? But if you're saying that there was a near-death experience of the company, then I'm going to assume that you did wonder, is this going to make it?
Yes. I think entrepreneurship is a balance of, this irrational exuberance and optimism on the one hand, and then also a very strong realism, right? Because ultimately, when you're trying to execute anything, you have to be realistic about what your customers want, what's possible, what's not possible, how long is it going to take, and so on, right? So it's sort of always this interesting dichotomy between optimism on the one hand and realism on the other. So, of course, we started with huge ambition, and even when it was just an idea on a PowerPoint, and then we raised, $1 million and then $50 million. Every step of the way, we were always optimistic, aiming for sort of world domination, if you will, and very, very ambitious because, services was a big idea. But then let's say the 2001 financial crisis hit, right, where suddenly a whole lot of businesses, including your customers in particular, don't have money anymore. And there's nothing you can do about it, right? So even if you've invested in a lot of things, you have these ambitious plans, but your customers don't have money, funding is dried up, right? Investors don't have money. And suddenly, what do you do, right? So you're sort of sitting there saying, when is this going to change? How is it going to change? What should my new strategy be, right? Because you can't build a business in a vacuum. You need your customers to use your services and pay for it. So and that 2001 became 2002, 3, 4, 5. I mean, it took quite a few years to recover. And along the way, that's when now you've built up. In our case, we had built up a team. We had, I think, at that time about a couple of hundred employees, based on certain projections, which no longer held. Right, you could not follow through on those, so we had to cut back. Be very, it was very difficult at a personal level as well. And then, cut back the team, maybe refocus the technology. We were focusing more on sort of smaller businesses and consumers. We had to focus a little bit on larger companies, which still had the cash and so on, right? So I think it gets so I think in those 2004-5 timeframe, we had cash issues that sometime we thought we'd struggle with, or we might even die as a company, right? Because ultimately, if you don't have runway, it doesn't matter what your ideas are, you can't execute. So, but so I think, yeah, we've had, an experience like that, and even later on after the 2008 crisis, there were difficult periods, but we survived fortunately, and lived to tell the story.
Now, you say fortunately, but I happen to believe that it has more to do with the moves that are made. I mean, calls that I'm going to assume that you had to make. So if you were talking to an entrepreneur trying to, plan for those bad times that do come, what were some of the skills or things that you've learned through that process that during a business's good time, you can prepare to make those bad times less traumatic?
So I think, one is sort of maintaining your own psychology is the hardest part, right? Which is, not to get too excited when things are going great, and conversely, not to get too, beaten up when things are not going so well. You really need to be somewhat equanimous and balanced as you're going through these situations. Whenever it's bad, it's not going to be bad forever, just like the good. It may not be that either.
Right.
So really, you have to be, it's hard to do that, but be a little clear-minded, saying, look, I can't control what's happening in the world out there, but what I can control is what I'm going to do about it, and the actions I'm going to take here. And and when you're realistic about what's possible or what can happen, or here are the options. The options sort of come to, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you're deeply immersed in your business. The things, what's possible, what's not, and what others can do, and so on. So I think I think that's the key. Usually, when people, I think sometimes your own psychology can get in the way of your own clear thinking, which leads to the outcome. So I've learned a lot about that. The other is, to manage stress, right? If an entrepreneur personalizes and takes it all on himself or herself, I think it can be really, really difficult, to handle that. Again, I come back to the same thing. It's like that serenity prayer, right? You control, you have the patience to handle the things that you can't control, but the courage to do the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference, sort of. So I think that's where you really just focus on what you can do, what you can control, stay within the realm of that. It's not the bad stuff that's happening to you, but what you do in response that's going to determine, the outcome.
That totally makes 100% sense. Now, the first time you're going through this, though, you didn't necessarily know that. How did you learn it? Was there a mentor? Was there a book? How did you figure that part out? Hello there, entrepreneur. This is Jay Massey, and what I want to say to you is that the number one mistake that I have ever made in business, number one, has been waiting too long to do the books, waiting too long to get the bookkeepers, the accountants, the CPAs, the CFOs involved, and I don't want you to make that same mistake. That mistake cost me over 6 figures, and now for a significant discount, you have the ability to get your books together using FreshBooks. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over to gofreshbooks.com/cashflow diary. Again, that's gofreshbooks.com/cashflow diary. FreshBooks is the easy to use software designed to help you, the small business owner, the freelancer, get organized and save time on invoicing, getting paid faster, keeping those books in order so that it becomes a bonus for you to do your taxes as opposed to a burden. Go over to gofreshbooks.com/cashflow diary and get started today. And now let's get back to the rest of the story.
I think, after breaking your head against a rock a few times, I think you realize pretty quickly that the rock's not going to break and your head is. So I think, it's really just a few battle scars and a few things that you try that doesn't work, and you quickly realize, saying, okay, here's what I need to do, because none of the other alternative is not going to work. So really just that. I mean, of course, I love reading. We had some good entrepreneurs. We had, so we were funded by Kleiner Perkins at Elance and NEA and Pequot Ventures, a few of the venture investors. So you always relied on, VCs and other mentors, sort of friends and family network as well, which was very helpful. I think alumni networks can be incredibly useful, a great resource that you can and should leverage, just whatever resources you can. And at least in Silicon Valley, that's the beauty of it. People are generally very open in terms of sharing. There's this collective wisdom and shared experiences that people are very open with. So I think that was immensely helpful.
So let me ask you this then, because, I mean, it's not like your company was the only company going through challenges. At the time, the entire world was going through challenges. Yet, not everybody or every company survived or made the decision to continue. Why did you just not choose to fold up shop and say, you know what, I quit?
That's a good question. I mean, I think for me personally, I've always felt like, when you raise money, you hire employees and you build a team. I've always had an immense sense of obligation because people are trusting you. They're having faith in you to do these things. And one way to look at it is, look, it's all business. But I've never felt that way. I've always thought that I think you when people do good to you and you do good in return, I think it sort of it comes back and benefits, I mean, in great ways. So I think to me, failure wasn't quitting wasn't an option, and even if failure happened, I mean, wouldn't be for lack of trying. So I think I don't know, I just never thought of that. Of just quitting, you just keep, you just focus on what you can do, and you had a dream, you had a vision, you're driven by that, and on top of it, a lot of other people have bought into that dream and vision, and you owe it to yourself, you owe it to them to kind of take it all the way there, right? Unless I thought that, okay, the idea itself wouldn't work, but we had customers and that loved us. We had a lot of good things that were working. It was just sort of, managing through the financial and market challenges that were in the way of getting sort of achieving your full potential. So, but I never thought about quitting quite that much, even though, you get these doubts and you wonder and you second guess yourself, no doubt. But I just kept marching on, really.
Got it. So when you look at the landscape today, I mean, you've got companies like, Uber, you've got Airbnb, you've got, even smaller companies like Soothe, who are, making massages happen, on demand, all of these things. Do you ever think to yourself, if there was no Elance, Upwork, there'd be no Airbnb, Uber, and these other companies that we see today?
And, you're right. I think what we pioneered, what's now called the gig economy, the freelance economy, has indeed sort of taken on these many, many different variations. Now, I wouldn't be so presumptive as to say they would not have come about, right? Because ideas can come from different places, and who knows? I think it would have happened, but clearly we sort of blazed a trail. We solved a lot of hard problems around people and trust and payments and sharing and so on. So I think there were a lot of hard challenges that we built, and that I think all these other companies that came later actually benefited from the lessons that we had, from the validation that we provided, and so on, right? So I think it's just gratifying in a way that you were there, because as an entrepreneur, it's a lonely journey, right? And when you start, there's a lot of naysayers. So in your own head, you think you have this great idea, but nobody else sees it. And then many years later, you see everybody doing it, and you say, okay, I'm not all that crazy. Maybe it was a good idea to begin with. So it just, it's gratifying. You take your joy in that. And ultimately, you can't predict every outcome. I mean, we fortunately, Elance, Upwork had a great outcome. A lot of other companies or entrepreneurs don't have that. So I'm happy about that. And some of these other companies have actually gone on to be even bigger, and so much the better. I think it just validates the initial idea that much more.
Yeah, totally understood it. It's got to feel some kind of special to be able to look back and see that, especially given the results and the lives that have been changed because of it. Because I mean, you've flattened the workforce, you've enabled opportunity where there was less before, and there are so many businesses, mine included, that depend upon that roadway that's been laid to be able to execute what we do. So, I know it's definitely makes and continues to make a difference in the lives of so many. Now, that's all what you've done, so to speak. Tell us more about what you're up to now.
So, sure. So after, so I founded Elance about, like I said, 20 years ago in late 98. And then I worked at the company for about 8 or 9 years. And then after that, I founded this company called Gupshup. What I'm working on right now, it's a messaging platform, a cloud messaging platform, and that it enables businesses to communicate with consumers, right? So, for example, when you buy something on Amazon, you get a text message saying your order has shipped, your package is on the way, or sometimes when you do a banking transaction, you get a text message. And throughout the world, businesses send a really large number of messages, about 2 trillion messages globally. Wow. To consumers. And what my company does is it enables a lot of the infrastructure that supports it, right? So we do a lot of business globally. We enable all of these messaging, and this enterprise to consumer messaging is actually evolving in a lot of interesting ways, right? So previously it was just kind of one-way simple notifications, but now it's becoming two-way conversations where, let's say, if you wanted to reschedule that package delivery, you could just reply with a text message saying, hey, don't send it tomorrow, I'm out. Can you send it the day after, right? And it would just reschedule it for you, for example. Or, it would be as simple as chatting with anybody. So if you heard of chatbots and AI-enabled conversations. So those are sort of the things that we're working on, messaging and conversations for businesses.
Well, and I have particular interest in this simply because in our business, as a short-term rental operator, our customers come from so many different places. And what happens is, like our Asian customers may be used to using WhatsApp. And then maybe we have a customer in the U.S. who wants to send us text messages. And then we've got another customer who'd rather just communicate via email. And then yet some just want to communicate via Messenger. And it gets really challenging to deliver the level of service that we want to deliver and have our team be able to look at each and every channel and managing it all the time. Am I correct in understanding that this is a problem you're looking to solve?
Yes, exactly right. Right. So what we offer is essentially a single API that seamlessly connects you to 30 plus messaging channels. Right. So think of it this way: as far as you're concerned as a business, your customers, your consumers may approach you through any one of these many different channels based on their own preferences or different geographies, whatever the case may be. But as far as you're concerned, it's really, if you, without having to worry about the channel, if you can just focus on what's the question, what's the query from the consumer, from your customer, and if you can respond to that, that would make life very simple, right? So that's step number one, which is a single API. And then step number two is, imagine if you could automate the frequently asked questions.
Yep.
Right. So then you don't even have to handle those. You just only focus on the escalated sort of unique questions that the users are asking. So it's win-win for everybody, right? The consumers get instant responses. They get their queries answered promptly, and they can decide and do whatever they want to do. Meanwhile, it frees you up to focus on the harder problems. So
please tell me this isn't going to take 20 years.
No, I'm done with that. I'm going to get things done a lot faster. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, because this is something that I know my team and we're wrestling with it right now, because it's like, how do we just have one platform, because without inconveniencing the customer too much? It's like, look, we get that you want to communicate online, but we don't have that. We just don't have it. So if you can communicate on this particular platform, because that's what's basically happening now, is we're forcing customers to change their habits in order to communicate with us, because we have no other way of, we can't, like you said, 30 plus channels. There's no way for a business to stay on top of that. That's really, really challenging today.
Exactly. And, I think it's sort of an interesting problem, right? On the one hand, businesses have to be where the consumers are, right? If you want to serve your consumers, make it simple for them, you got to go where they are and make it easy on them, right? But on the other hand, it's such a proliferation of messaging channels that, in the old days, it used to be just, they'd call in by phone or at most email. And now, with the rise of smartphones and mobile messaging, you have such a wide variety of messaging channels that it makes it really harder, right? So, but if you get that right, there are many benefits to it, right? First, people are always connected to their mobile devices, which means you can interact with them 24/7. You can serve them and actually sell, right? I mean, the chances are they're trying to buy your product.
Right.
And if only you could respond in the middle of the night, respond instantly, I mean, you might get more sales, right? Or you might get more transactions, more conversions. So it is important to get it right? And to be able to close deals even when you're sleeping. And that can be a very, very powerful thing. So,
what's interesting to me is I think you might be a little addicted to some of the most challenging problems. You don't like small stuff. I like it though. It's like this is not as, communication is challenging in and of itself, right? The telephone made a big difference. Internet makes a big difference, and each of these platforms probably have their own uniquenesses and intricacies that I can't even begin to understand. How did this idea come about? Like, there's two things that has to happen. One, obviously you have to have the idea, but then you have to have this in your head going, yeah, I can solve that. Where does that come from?
I guess the best way to describe it is really, connecting the dots, right? Because we've been, in the early days, we were, doing just sort of plain messaging or one-way notifications, if you will. And then, and you're talking to customers, both enterprises as well as consumers. And oftentimes consumers would say, hey, I want to report a problem with my message, or there was, let's say, some fraud with my credit card. How do I got this notification, but it's not my transaction. How do I tell the bank? And vice versa, the enterprises or businesses would often say that, I want to collect feedback from my customers. Are they happy? Am I meeting their needs? And so on. And you just say, okay, there has to be a better way. And when you enable, two-way conversations, of course, that's very powerful. But as a business, the moment you enable two-way conversations, you're still going to get inundated with millions of queries. So then you have to have automation, and which means you need tools like AI and natural language processing, because when consumer queries come in, they're going to phrase it in natural language, right? They're not going to give you structured queries. So it's sort of, when you just walk through it logically, in trying to solve one problem, in creating one solution, you end up with another problem, and then you solve that, and that leads to another one. And then ultimately, when you reach the end, what you have is a very clean, elegant solution that works, and it's good for your customers. And of course, it's, great business for you. But yeah, to your earlier point, I do like solving big problems that impact, millions of lives. And we did that with Upwork. We're doing that with Gupshup now as well. And it's super exciting to be able to work on. It's, the way I like to say it is, it's equally hard to solve a small problem or a big problem. So you might as well work on a big one, because if you succeed, the outcome is that much greater.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. Now, when looking at Gupshup, what is the kind of target market of the customer? Because is this really something, say, a smaller business could use?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, so what we are doing, right, is when you think about these AI-enabled chatbots, for now, a large enterprise might want to customize every aspect of it, but for smaller businesses, we are creating these predefined templates that they can use. So one template that we had created was for studios and salons, right? Hair salons and yoga studios, for example.
Wow.
Where scheduling is a big problem, right? They have a calendar, and customers have to schedule appointments, and that's 80% of the phone calls they get in are for scheduling, and it's so critical. They have to do it, but it's very repetitive, very routine task, right? And if you can just create, so we created a templatized chatbot which can handle a schedule, provide the available slots to the customer. They can look at the options, pick one of them, confirm the appointment, and that's it. And now nobody needs to, there's no person that has to speak to them. So the customer is happy. They have a lot more flexibility. The studio owner is happy. They don't have to spend as many resources, and there's no technical skill set required to enable this. It was literally a couple of clicks. They have to link their Facebook account, the Facebook Messenger account, and link their underlying system. In this case, it was MindBody, but there could be any other technical system. So with a couple of clicks, they were able to get going and launch it, right? So similarly, imagine restaurants or other kinds of businesses with similar cases. We've automated many such instances. And I think it's equally valid. In fact, it's more critical for small businesses because, they're always tight for resources. People are scarce, and sometimes they don't have the ability to invest it. It's a little bit like, they're too busy to invest in their own productivity and so on. So a chatbot can make a big difference. And these days it's quick and easy to do as well.
Yeah, I totally like it because the more we can leverage technology, I think the more small businesses you enable to actually succeed. I mean, at the end of the day, because we can serve more and more individuals. So I definitely like where this is headed. Now, for those that have listened this far and want to find out more about what you've got going on, what's going to be the best way for them to follow up with you and to find that out?
So our website is gupshup.io, right? It's gupshup.io. And we have a lot of tools there for businesses to build chatbots if they like. or tools, predefined templates for certain kinds of businesses. I think that might be very helpful. Yeah, I think that would be the best place to find more resources about that.
Excellent. Now, as we wind down, I've got a question for you because I'm curious to hear your answer. I'm almost afraid of your answer because of the size of the problems you like to take on, but I still want to know. So, there's a person who's listening who's, gathered some courage from listening to you, your story, and understanding that, they can make it. And maybe they're going from 6 to 7 figures, 7 to 8 figures, and they're trying to figure it out, or maybe they're just getting started. But no matter their case, right now they're going, I can do this. And in fact, they're standing in front of what I like to call the superhero outfit store. They're ready to make their journey and begin. Now, like I know, that when these large decisions are made, there's often a companion, and that companion comes in the form of a voice, and that voice reminds us of how it didn't work last time. And don't you remember 2001, 2008 when you tried? And don't you know, 9 out of 10 businesses fail? And what on earth are you thinking anyway? Why not just stay in your place where you are right now? And for some people, they're related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend today's going to be different. Today, Beerud, they're going to follow through. They're going to do exactly what you suggest. And they're going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. So what would you suggest that they do?
I would say, listen to the voice to the extent that you're trying to understand why is it saying what is it saying. If it's just fear mongering for no reason, I mean, that's not really helpful, right? But the why is interesting. Why did things happen in 2001? Well, we're not in a similar situation right now, so that lesson is not particularly helpful. Or why did the last problem happen, and what did we learn from it? And if you've learned the lesson, you're not going to make the same mistake for sure. So again, that's no reason to not do it. I think it's good to understand, the risks, to be realistic about the challenges that may happen. But ultimately, after you've gone through it, and usually entrepreneurs have a strong gut sense saying, I know there's an opportunity here. I know I can do it. And this solution, the world needs my solution, and it'll lead to a better outcome. I mean, ultimately, you just have to sort of follow your gut and follow through on it. It is difficult. It is okay to be nervous. It is okay to be a little scared. I mean, that's part. That's part of the course. I mean, that is part of the journey. So, but ultimately, it does take. You do have to dive in, and to get to the other side. So you really have to. I think just go for it ultimately, right? But do it with your eyes wide open. Do it, figure out the risk. What's the worst that can happen? How can you mitigate that risk? How can you reduce it? Do some contingency planning. What happens? What would you do if this happens or that? And those are not to hold you back. Those are just to prepare you even better for the inevitable challenges that will follow.
Inevitable challenges, indeed. That is for 100% sure, and I like it. And I definitely, like I said, I appreciate your willingness to take on large problems, the impact that you've had, not just on small business or myself, but the world in general. And the fact that you continue to take on large challenges, even when some would say, you know what, you're done. You don't have to do anymore. You don't see it that way. I definitely appreciate that. And I just want to be the first to thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge, your wisdom, and your insight here with us today at the Cashflow Diary.
No, thanks for having me. And, I learned a lot from my mentors or my friends who went through similar experiences. So I'm happy to pay it forward. Thanks again for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? Well, today, I think it actually means go to Gupshup.io. Why? Because I know a number of you are dealing with the same challenges my business is dealing with. You got customers and they're communicating to you on so many different places, and you're trying to corral that information and make sure that it works as best as humanly possible. And this could be a possible solution for you. I know we'll be looking at that. But more importantly, understand that mental mindset, guarding your mental mindset, is huge when it comes to dealing with your business. Yes, there will be ups, there will be downs, and that's okay. It doesn't mean it's the end, and it doesn't mean that good times last forever, neither do bad times. And at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, you can do it. It's been fun talking to you guys today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.